Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our July DevSecOps Bunch. It's hard to believe we're past the middle of the year. We're excited today to have my good friend and longstanding expert in mobile, John Mutter from IBM, joining us today to talk about Zero Trust. As is typical when we do our monthly event, we'll wait about 60 seconds to give folks the chance to join, get logged in and settled and ready to go. So grab your cup of coffee or your soda or what have you. We'll get going here in just a second. Today's topic is a very interesting one for me and John. We've both been around since BlackBerry days and the original mobile that was secure. And it's been fascinating to watch what's going on in the industry as we've tried to evolve from many different kinds of security and layered security paradigms. And Zero Trust is kind of turning history on its side. And the reason we're talking about it today is you might think, if I'm a developer or a security person focused on DevSecOps and building applications and mobile applications, why should I care about Zero Trust? The reason you should care about it is because every organization is going this direction as a way to change the way they protect the enterprise. And so all of us are going to be part of these Zero Trust programs, and that's why we brought it in today. So with that, let's get rolling. Today, we're going to talk about building mobile apps and running secure pipelines in Zero Trust programs. As we get started here, the session is being recorded, and you will get a copy of the recording. You will get a copy of the deck, and you will get links to some excellent follow-up content that we recommend as well within a few days once we're done. We will be taking questions and answers as we go, so please use the Q&A tab to ask your questions. And John and I will have a look at those questions at the end. Any ones that we aren't able to answer today, we'll follow up via email and other contact. So without further ado, John, would you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Brian. It's great to be here, everyone. My name is John Mutter. I'm the global CTO of IBM's Experience Design and Mobile Practice, part of IBM Interactive. Been at IBM for about 9 years, focused on our mobile strategy, including full stack, as well as front-end mobile development, web development, emerging technologies like spatial, and other opportunities that seem to come our way around experience. Experience is a very important aspect of what I do. Trying to bring that human-centric approach to IBM's practice has been an exciting and fun challenge. And I will tell you that a company like IBM is perfect to implement these types of strategies.
All right. I've known John on and off for the better part of a really long time. And we just won't quote ages today. I'm the Chief Mobility Officer here at NowSecure. I am the host of the monthly DevSecOps Bunch here. So I lead our strategy, in-market strategy, chief evangelist, work with standards bodies, and so on and so forth. And I've been doing mobile for a long time as well. And prior to mobile, I was in application development. So it's a nice intersection now when you think about mobile apps, mobile development, and all of it coming together. Briefly, we're going to talk about NowSecure and IBM. Quick intro on NowSecure for those of you who are new to us, possibly coming from IBM or other groups to hear this today. So we're a mobile-first, mobile-only company. So we were born in 2009 at the beginning of iOS and Android when mobile applications and modern technology got started. Today, we deliver a full suite of mobile solutions, and we partner with IBM in the market. We've got automated security testing, we have pen testing services, we have online training, we have consulting business, and so on and so forth. We work with all the major application development companies and technology stacks, and we're really focusing organizations on mobilizing to meet their faster release cycles, deliver high quality, secure software, minimize risk in their enterprise, and safeguarding trust with their users, and doing all of that in today's economy as scalable and efficiently as possible. We do a lot of work in the standards world, working with OWASP on the mobile spec, Google, IOXT, and so on and so forth. Top tech vendors, the carriers, and are well recognized in this space. And from a client perspective, we're predominantly used in mobile-centric organizations and regulated businesses. So you see us a lot in banking and finance. You see us in retail and consumer. You see us heavily in medical because mHealth is the fastest growing part of medical, and large part due to COVID and remote and home healthcare scenarios as well. We do a ton of work in the high-tech industry, and of course, we work with federal agencies, prominently in the US and around the world. So when organizations are looking to ensure the security of their mobile apps, they do turn to NowSecure. Now, when they're building great systems and transforming, they turn to IBM. So John, let's remind folks about IBM.
Thanks, Brian. IBM Interactive is a portion of IBM Consulting, and our purpose is to help our enterprise customers to create great design in their applications and in their engagement with their customers. We saw the need right away to have a group that was highly specialized in creating front-end development. And so we identified kind of 4 pillars that define how we engage with clients and how we help clients in this space through advising, creating, building, and managing. On the advise side, we're helping our clients, look at what those opportunities are, how to put together governance, how to put together their operating models, how to set aside their brand and get it well defined, and then what a design language should look like for them. And then maybe they want to change things up, we can help them. In the create phase, this is getting our hands dirty and helping them figure it out together in approaching a human-centric view for forward-looking. While in the build space, we have developers, we have marketing people, we have CRM solutions, we have partnerships with Adobe, we have partnerships with SAP, Salesforce. So any major integration that you want to do, that's where we're able to bring that front-end power together with those powerful back-end systems. And then finally, we have the ability to manage your ongoing services and help you grow and expand. We do that through, next slide, the human-centric and value-driven approach. This is, if you can, next slide there, Brian. This is where we're helping them think about enterprise design thinking. That is to apply that human-centric, personalized view of how to approach business problems. When you look at it, adoption is what really creates the return on investment, and adoption cannot be mandated. You have to create great, usable, functional applications that connect with human beings in a meaningful way. And this is part of the process. You can't just throw stuff up there and go, but look at what shade of blue I use. You have to have something that's talk to the users and help them to get to that space. Next slide. One of the main ways that we do that is what we call our IBM Garage method. And this methodology, which I'd love to just go on and on and on about, but in the interest of time, what I'll tell you is that it's co-create, co-execute, and cooperate to build out these solutions and deliver faster and faster value to our clients. Brian, back to you.
So we've seen amazing results in working with IBM in the marketplace. So as you're looking at these mobile innovation, it's not about hacking a mobile app anymore. It's about transformational and user empowerment, right? Today's economy is dominated by the mobile user. Everything in life is mobile centric now. So we're excited to be working with IBM. Now, if we're going to talk about zero trust, I'm just going to kind of set the stage here. And if you're a common attendee, I always like to use pictures to tell a story. And so I've been on stage a lot talking about zero trust here in the last year. So I like to talk about adventures in securing the perimeter, right? So if we go back a few hundred years, it was all about the castle and the moat and the gates and the pouring the hot oil and the shooting the arrows and all that kind of stuff. And so the things we wanted to secure, we built a wall around, right? And once something was inside the wall, we trusted it. And so that's why everybody tried to breach the wall. And we got a little more sophisticated in the last 200 years. And we built better walls and purpose-built forts and everything else, to try to keep people and bad guys from coming in. And in the end, pretty much anybody would still breach them, right? And if you even look at modern warfare today, so this is actually a picture in Afghanistan, it still looks like whatever a fort looked like 500 years ago with a wall and things in the middle, right? So as sort of warfare and protection of the physical world has evolved not very much, tech has gone through some interesting evolutions. So if we look at kind of the new world of securing perimeter, if data is driving the economy and technology is the vehicle that data is riding in, right, we can look at all the tech we're using, right, and what's secure and what's not. So you have your laptop and your devices. And so I'm going to put some MDM on my phone and some sort of endpoint on my laptop, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I might be trying to use a secure browser on it. That's going to have some layers of security and firewalls and VPN and all kinds of great stuff, routed into my data centers for where I have on-prem data centers. And then, of course, I've got the cloud stuff that I'm connecting with as well. And all of this still has the sense of, if I lock down the device and the user and the endpoint and put some network security in place, it still looks like the old fort, which is once they're inside the wall, they can kind of get anywhere. And that's where zero trust is kind of a game changer. So we're talking about zero trust because modern application development today should include considerations for zero trust. Your apps you should be building to run in a zero trust environment and be able to interact appropriately with the zero trust infrastructure that either your company has deployed or they will be deploying. And we're looking at examples of that today as we go through this. So I'm going to do like a 3 to 5 minute primer on zero trust for those of you who are sort of application development and application security types. So we recommend having a look at some of the NIST publications. There's lots of white papers. IBM has a white paper to share as well. But NIST is a good place to kind of go to home, where a lot of core work has gone in terms of setting standards. And so moving from that notion of static network-based defense perimeter like the moat and the tower and the walls into a place where what we want to do is secure the users, the assets, and the resources. The assets are the data, the devices, the network, and all the other things. And in this architecture, you basically trust nothing. And every single time something wants to do something, you have to reestablish trust. And you monitor that, and you age it out, or you time it out, and you make them reestablish trust again. And you never make assumptions that something inside the perimeter is safe. And that is a fundamental change in how all of this works. So there's a link here to the NIST doc. Have a look. There's lots of content in the world. So when we think about this, if we think about this from a generalized perspective, and then we'll look at it from like a mobile perspective. So traditional security looked at the endpoint and the network. Authentication and authorization are about access to assets from the outside the perimeter. And then once I'm inside the perimeter, I can kind of do a lot of different things, right? And so if you come from sort of red teaming or security operations, lateral movement is a disaster. You want to protect from it. But one of the biggest challenges right now are things like insider threats, because you're understanding and allowing people to do whatever once they're inside the perimeter. That allows for insider, that allows for long-standing network penetrations, that allows for lateral movement, lots of bad things. So zero trust, now we're looking at everything, the humans, the assets, the networks, workflow data, and all of that. And we're forcing reauthentication, reauthorization for every single session for every resource, right? There is no longer a perimeter of trust that is a global perimeter for my enterprise. It's now every individual asset or user doing something has to go through its own trust cycle. So there's nothing implicit, there's nothing granted. And so when you do this, that means you're going to change how you're going to operate, and that's going to change how you're going to build software. That's going to change the tools that your team is using to secure your enterprise. So my quick horsey ducky picture of what you'll find in the NIST guide that I've drawn on the whiteboard way too many times. So your user, they have devices with apps. Everything is untrusted until they go through a policy enforcement point that allows them to establish trust. Once they get through that, they are then trusted. They are trusted to specific resources on the back end based on policy. So you could be an executive and you get access to a lot. You could be an individual person, say in a retail operation in a storefront, you get access to selling something and that's it. You can't see payroll or anything else. And so key components here become the policy engine, policy enforcement, and how the applications interact with the infrastructure that's been stood up for policy enforcement and the other security layers in the business. So if we think about this and try to apply an application point of view, and John's going to go into this more detail, here are some things that we often train on. So now your threat model is different because you're not assuming a safe perimeter and you're assuming breach at any time. Many organizations still don't do great threat modeling. You don't think about, well, if breach at any time, what does that mean to my application or my mobile application architecture? That means your organization is using IAM or identity and access management controls for sure, because most places start zero trust around the identity side of the house. And for your customers who are not going to be in your identity system, using multi-factor auth for sure. You want to use it for internally, but also your customer-facing apps should be using it. You have to encrypt all your data all the time, everywhere. Hey, that's good hygiene anyway. We should be remembering to do that. You need to make sure key management is properly handled. And in this world, that may be interfacing with other zero trust technologies related to key management, such as your PKI system or something else. You want to minimize permissions for the app. We see lots of bad behavior on Android, for example, where apps ask for permission to do everything. Well, now you're going to be using device controls or network-based controls to make sure that that app isn't asking for everything or is containing or constraining what that app and what permissions it might ask, and so on and so forth. You need to be enforcing session timeouts, right? And that has come, session timeouts have come in the mobile banking apps because of banking regulations, but that should be practiced everywhere. APIs are ruling the modern application economy. You gotta have a gateway in front of that in some way, shape, or form for API security. And then a key part of this is making sure you can detect and respond. So you want to have proper logging for the behavior monitoring so that you can help your team detect when malicious behavior might be going on, trying to get around it. Because a lot of zero trust technology is also looking at behavior monitoring under the hood. And so we bring these up because these are other technology stacks that may be running in your organization. You're going to have to be able to accommodate as part of your overall application architecture as you move through it. So that was my 5 minutes of everything you never wanted to know about zero trust. I'm going to hand it over to John, who's going to bring us into the real world of what IBM's been doing with their clients and their partners around bringing real zero trust with mobile apps and devices for the enterprise.
Thanks, Brian. So first things first, you know, zero trust is a real thing that we all need to be looking at, figuring out how we're going to take on board. I believe like 95% plus, almost 97% of organizations today have an actual zero trust initiative that they're working on right now. So it's coming, whether you are on board or not, it's coming for you. You have to start thinking about it. And I have to stop and think about the very sensitive nature of access we grant to users on mobile devices, whether it's an internal enterprise application or if it's an external customer-facing application. Every single user is more empowered than ever before for self-service access, for capabilities, for functionality, to do the things that they need to do. Whether they used to call someone on the phone and get help, or go in and see their local branch and get help, or work with their personal banker, or whatever the case may be, today, you can get so much done on that mobile device. That being the case, we have some very specific areas that we're giving a lot of attention to initially. First, device exposure. The device exposure piece is interesting because unlike a desktop computer, this isn't an on-premise device. It goes all over the place. You know, it gets left in New York City cabs. It gets taken home. Your kids install software on it that you may not necessarily approve of. And it's used in such a wide variety of solutions that even the best MDM strategy has trouble keeping up with everything that's on the device unless it's fully managed. And even the device manufacturers, you know, have limited how far you can go to managing a device when it's a personally owned device. So that being the case, right, we as developers have to always be thinking, hey, this device exposure thing is real. Next is credential exposure. You know, the proliferation of hacked password databases, renegade fake applications, and how easy it is to trick people through phishing. This is a real problem. A lot of issues kind of baked into how we make sure that we're doing authentication correctly. I've even seen developers build multi-factor authentication completely wrong that introduced more security flaws than had they just done basic authentication with some level of encryption and not tried to do multi-factor authentication. And so that also goes on to application exposure. It's the apps themselves are sometimes thrown together and built with a multitude of products, some known, some unknown. So like looking at the SolarWinds hack, you know, that whole big thing that came out, you know, so many questions about the software vendors that supplied pieces of software to the exploit that was there. And then think of the sheer number of users who just used the exploit without even knowing what they were doing to themselves, or even knowing if they were fully exposed. Like an organization had no idea that a developer used something that exposed them in some capacity. That happens, right? Turnover happening constantly. And then insider threat pieces. I mean, dealing with insiders that have malintent can be one of the most difficult and challenging things that we do. And here's the important part for me on how we handle this with our own IBM. Tools, and more tools. And that's why I'm here talking about NowSecure. You know, I cannot speak highly enough about how important it is to check, double check, recheck, and do those simple things to try and eliminate as few of those things as possible through automation, like a spell check for mobile security, if you've ever heard me say that before. Because some of these four things, we can catch simple little errors as quickly as possible. We can identify some of those things. So next slide. If you think about how mobility plays a critical role in our zero trust strategy, enterprise resources is the first part of it. And I like to talk about this in an N-tier architecture model. So in that model with a presentation tier, an application tier, and a data tier, in web space, we had this very well established methodology for how you approach sensitive data. You started a presentation tier very carefully took it to the application tier very carefully brought data back and forth to the data tier. And so you couldn't just wildly go crazy between them. And we had network infrastructure that kind of supported how those functioned or how much access you could get. But in the mobile space, N-tier architecture is almost completely broken, because your mobile apps are speaking all over the place, any place where appropriate. And we try and use API gateways to make that your central focus. But in it, there's so many opportunities to break the model and go places as an internet user anywhere inside of an organization, where that would never have been allowed years ago, right? We just would have had firewalls and choke routers and all of these different things to help us control the flow of traffic in that way. And now with mobile, we've got to go after it. So, you know, in this model, we're talking about how you have to approach it from granular evaluation and start that through policy decision enforcement engines, looking at all the places where we collect data to add additional salt to the equation that goes above and beyond just a username and password, right? Starting to say, okay, this request is from China. It never comes from China. I'm not trying to say anything about China. I'm just saying, right? It's like, it doesn't normally come from China. Why is it coming from China now? And then that ability to start making those type of questions is also relevant. And also as simple as, we only want this application to be worked inside of our enterprise. So if you're not connected to my corporate Wi-Fi, then any other Wi-Fi is probably not safe for this application to function on. These type of things. So next slide. We are also going out of our way to evolve how we handle this. So Samsung Knox, I think, is a great example of, you know, one of the tools that adds a really enhanced capability of enterprise grade security, going so far above and beyond just, did I develop things correctly, but creating a very secure space with which to function, and then control the flow of data from personal into enterprise and enterprise into personal. So this really helps us when we have these personal liable devices that are carrying and functioning with highly sensitive data. And it also helps us with customer engagements where incredibly sensitive data can be very embarrassing to be lost by an organization. These are the, and government's high-level security accounts, PCI type data that you definitely don't want to lose. This model is helping us to enable applications that previously would be so much overhead from a development perspective to be able to function and work with. So on top of having the automated testing, the penetration testing, the validation capabilities that we get with NowSecure, then also building out a highly trusted platform. Next slide. And so here we go. a use case that I'll share, which is countering device exposure with Samsung Knox, since we're just kind of talking through it. And once again, this is just an example of the evolution of how this is taking place inside of enterprise. So monitoring device health, defending against exposure, all practical examples of where we're able to take the total picture of the application, everything from transit all the way to the device, on device, data at rest, and then how we're protecting the flow of data from the device back and forth between personal and workspace areas. So Samsung attestation keys, which are stored within Knox, they also can help us to ensure that the device itself is secure, with additional protections that we can give in this space that's just above and beyond. And next slide. All right, identifying credential exposure. This is our evolution of the model as well. Think along the lines of changing our understanding of what a user identity is. You know, shifting that thought from just a username and password to who is the person, what are their biometrics, what are their behaviors, where are they from a geography perspective, what type of device are they using, you know, and when things begin to change beyond the normal, an escalation in what we do from prompting for credentials and access into the application and into the enterprise. So this is all capabilities that exist from a mobile perspective, and they have to be implemented the right way. This is kind of interesting, right? I've seen numerous times where we've implemented Touch ID, but we've implemented it the wrong way. And a great example of where the NowSecure tools have helped us kind of catch that really fast and go, oh, that could have been a problem, easy to fix, you know, just a simple little developer mistake, and we're in good shape. And then next, reacting to the point of exposure. So here's an example of where Knox can help us kind of get and protect that space. And I think that's good. But there's other things that we can do on iOS as well to try and secure and protect our space based on what we know to be an exposure link. And then finally, identifying partners and educating our users. So this is something that IBM is working with our clients on, and we have some more abilities to help clients get active in that space, and continue to improve in that area. And next slide. And there we go. In this instance, guarding against application exposure, I talked about it, and I'll say it one more time. I can't speak highly enough about how important it is to incorporate the NowSecure testing tools into your suite. From a CTO perspective, you know, we've got a lot of practitioners inside of IBM, and I consider it absolutely essential that we make these tools available, whether it's an internal or an external application, for us to run spell check for mobile security to ensure we haven't made any mistakes. Making the tools available to the development teams is my responsibility if I want to ensure that we're doing great things. Lots and lots of hands touching code, working in different directions, simple mistakes are made, and having that discipline to incorporate tools like this into your DevOps tool chain is essential. It takes so much weight off of my shoulders to know that I'm not negligent in my responsibilities to ensure that we're making a reputable effort on every single build to ensure we're not doing silly mistakes. There's lots more that we do. This isn't the only thing that we do, but it speaks to the importance of this element for us to be able to just do a quick check, gut check, make sure that we're in good shape, and then move on. And next slide. And finally, the use case of combating our insider threats. This is another Samsung Knox kind of use case, which I think is pretty interesting. Identifying SIMs, working with devices that are lost and stolen. And there's also things, right? I mean, you think about SMS-based multi-factor authentication. So how do we protect applications from SMS jacking and those type of things. So how can we prevent SIM cards from being cloned or moved around in inappropriate ways? This is kind of information here that talks about how we can do that, or how we can limit corporate assets that are being used on devices. The device loss and theft, I mean, once a device goes missing, that ability to ensure that everything that's important is taken care of and you have some accountability, that's been on our radar for years and years, Brian. I remember you and I dealing with stuff like this 12 years ago. So, and it's still just as important today as it was then. Next slide. Into the pipeline. All yours, Brian.
I'm going to take and run. So, all right. So we saw some really great examples, and Zero Trust really is a hardware, software, systems combo to really make this work, right? So John gave great examples of leveraging particular kinds of hardware and configuration, like Samsung hardware, which is the ultimate in security, and rolling that through the application architecture, the network architecture, and how like security operations team is going to work, and so on and so forth. So if we want to look at the application layer and more specifically get into, let's build some mobile apps, what are some additional things we need to think about when we're doing that? And that gets into requirements and how we run the pipeline. So I did a workshop, oh God, when was it? January, February in Federal around Zero Trust. And so I'm going to walk you through some of the things that we worked up through the workshop here. So as you know, in DevSecOps Bunch, we always have this pipeline diagram. You may have a picture like this, similar, different, but it's a standard pipeline, right? So there's the classic part of work you do up front, then you get into the code, commit, build, test cycle in the middle, where you're looking for fast feedback loops, and then you get into the staging and deployment and then running it and monitoring. And then of course, there's a big circle that goes all the way back to the iterative development that you're ultimately going to do. And in like the IBM garage, it's amazing to watch them do this. So when we think about begin with the end in mind, right, that means you actually want to have some standards and policy on the front end. That's why we're having a conversation like today, which is your development team, your architecture team, your security team, QA, they all need to get together and understand what Zero Trust means and what the implications are for Zero Trust, and establishing a set of policies and requirements for how you're going to migrate your pipelines to run in a Zero Trust environment, and how you're going to migrate your application architecture and your application requirements and testing requirements to operate in a Zero Trust world, right? So it's an opportunity to collaborate. It's a learning cycle for everyone, and you want to have evolving. So while you have other policies related to your industry, you may have a set of standards and policies because you're in healthcare or finance or what have you. You also now need to factor in the Zero Trust requirements as part of that. Then you got to do the training, right? So we continue to bang the gong that we tend to find that mobile developers are underskilled when it comes to writing secure code. So making sure you have some good training in place for your development team that can be simple and straightforward, like what are the 5 most common vulnerabilities, how to make sure you don't do that, how to properly use crypto or storage or network, right? Make sure they get some of that training. We have that training online in our free NowSecure Academy, where your team can go ahead and get training for free on that. Now, we're going to build into this also now some Zero Trust oriented training. So while we were standardizing, we want to make sure that developers are writing code. Maybe they need some training on how and why to do multi-factor. Maybe they need some training on how to understand why I want to have expiring sessions, or a different way to do permissions management, or training on how to integrate with your identity tools, or things of that nature, right? So don't forget the training part here, because again, if people don't know what they're doing, they're not going to build it the right way, and you're going to have issues downstream. Now, from the training side of the house, now we move into actually writing our tickets. And so while you're building a great innovative app iteratively in your program, and you've got dynamic creation of requirements and so on and so forth, make sure those Zero Trust requirements flow in, right? So for some of our customers, they tag in their GitHub, these are requirements, or Jira, these are the requirements related to our new Zero Trust initiative that needs to be adopted because this app must conform to that, right? So again, in your requirements mix, make sure you bring Zero Trust in. Make sure you link to other resources. So NIST, for example, has great resources, so do others in the industry that might be good references for how to properly handle crypto or minimum bar requirements for identity from your identity vendor or what have you. The other thing really to look for is there is so much software out there now to support zero trust, like your identity tools. So pre-select components, establish standard frameworks, all those kinds of things, right? We all know the best way to get developers to adopt something is to pre-select it, make it a standard, and then have everybody use it, right? So make sure that cycle occurs. And so the requirements are to use the industry standard identity tools. Here's the library you're supposed to use on iOS, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing that's important is if you're really going to do this right, your entire development infrastructure should also run in a zero trust environment. So the way you're coding, the way you're testing and building, you should have, staging prod environments, test development environments. They should all be configured in a zero trust strategy. A, so your team can learn. B, so you don't get supply chain attacks. And C, because your app's going to have to run in a zero trust environment. It's like eating your own dog food. Of course, your development environment should mirror your production environment. You should follow those hygiene practices as well. We had a client who was on a zero trust strategy. They did a kind of a hard cutover. And the first application they built, the development team wasn't operating their test environment that mirrored their production zero trust environment. And guess what disaster happened when they pushed to prod, right? So make sure you think your way through all of that. So continuing on, when we get into building and writing the code, of course, we need to test the code. So you want to have automated security testing in the pipeline. John talked about that. That's what we're doing with IBM on their projects, is making sure every day the code is written, the code is checked. You catch the low-hanging fruit, you catch the important things, et cetera, and make sure your automated testing has tests relevant to your zero trust requirements. You may not need a lot of them, but you ought to have a few of them, right? Make sure that your automated testing is integrated into your platform environment. So when you do the build of an app, it automatically tests that app and then automatically generates tickets and feeds those tickets back to the developer, right? Any good testing hygiene will have QA automation that generates QA tickets back to the developers of issues developers need to fix, and should also be generating security and privacy tickets automatically back to the developers. The developers can then go fix those issues that you detect, along with whatever level of routing and orchestration and vulnerability management you might want there, right? So continuous testing, feed them those tickets. Zero trust tickets are requirements. Zero trust tickets are things to fix anyway as well. Now, for those highest risk applications, you can't automate everything, so you make sure you still have pen testing in the pipeline. Pen testing should always be threat model driven. And now when we think about your threat model, make sure your threat modeling has evolved to incorporate zero trust principles and what can go wrong, right? So that means you've got principles in the threat model. They're also going to flow into how you're doing your pen testing. So your pen testing team needs training on zero trust, so they make sure they're testing for things related to zero trust, or your outsourced pen testing firm as well. You can use continuous pen testing by pre-scheduling the work so you don't have delays on the tail end, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the nice thing about the strategy we're talking about here is if you blend automated and periodic pen testing, automated can do 60, 70, 80% of the work for you, so that when you get to the pen testing side, they're just doing the small bit that's left that automation didn't cover. That reduces your costs, shortens the testing cycle, and everything else. One other really super important place that our pen testing team has been focusing on is the negative tests. Remember, attackers are going after your network in a zero trust environment. You need to be looking at unusual behaviors. John made the comment earlier about, is the device in China? Are they, logging in too frequently? Are they pulling down abnormal data, right? So your pen testing should evolve to consider some of those kinds of things. There were design criteria for your application. You should also be testing in that manual pen testing side. And then finally, of course, you need to monitor stuff in production, right? That's where the active attacks are occurring, et cetera, et cetera. In that production monitoring you might be doing today, you might be watching performance and usability. You should also be watching security, and somewhere in your team or in your broader security and SOC, they'll be looking for zero trust issues flowing through there as well. So to a large extent, when we look at this pipeline, it's everything you already know about how to optimize a DevSecOps pipeline and layering in zero trust. Make sure your pipeline itself is running in a zero trust environment. Make sure you have development, test, and prod environments that are configured similarly to your production environment to make sure you're not leaving any gaps or missing anything or hit friction on the release. And then make sure you have the right requirements in development and testing occurring throughout that cycle. Now, briefly to go with this, NowSecure platform is largely what we've been talking about today. Pen testing services can support you. Want to point out that NowSecure Academy is out there for you for learning as well. So again, I said we would take questions at the end, bringing us together, quickie on summary, John, here on IBM, and then I'll do NowSecure.
Sure. Brian, first, let me just say a call out to NowSecure Academy and how invaluable this service is. Writing secure code, you touched on it before as you kind of went through the whole life cycle there. And that aspect of writing secure code, just think about how quickly environments change, how quickly an exploit gets out there and suddenly is something you need to worry about that you never had to worry about before. And this process means that, this thing moves so quickly that when I sit down and document how I want people to do mobile security, the second I create that document, it's probably out of date. And now, instead of having a useful document that's out there telling people how to be better at what they do, I essentially have an artifact that may be giving people bad information. Because we don't have the ability to every single day be giving people the information that they need about the latest developments in security. They're doing projects, they're delivering, they're working with clients. And so this is a great use case for NowSecure Academy. I know that anytime that we go to it, has the latest and greatest information. It has the latest and greatest guidance. It's reflecting what's out there for the OWASP top 10. I mean, there's some real value that's there. And I love that it took a lot of the burden off of my plate to try and manage all of that.
Well, thank you for that, John. So when we think about, IBM, you have an amazing team there, and this is why we come together. So a chance to kind of circle together on the IBM value prop.
Yeah, that's right. About 17,000 creators and makers around the globe in 50 different design studios. All of these are active, experienced designers, experienced developers, and they need a tool like this, right? They need to be thinking about zero trust. They need to be thinking about security in the very, very beginning of everything that we do. It's not an afterthought. It's a job one. And then, of course, just remember that human-centric approach means that we also need human-centric tools to help us achieve excellent outcomes.
Absolutely, and as we'd said earlier, we're the one-stop shop for all things mobile security. If you're coming to Black Hat, look us up. Would love to show you what's going on. We got a couple of resources. John talked about NowSecure Academy. Most of NowSecure Academy is free. The certifications are paid, so you can jump in here and get started right after this call at academy.nowsecure.com. In our follow-up email, we will include links to that. A lot of our customers are working heavily in the GitHub environment. So we've got native GitHub integrations for super fast developer pipeline experiences. So you can have a look at that. And we, in addition to our monthly DevSecOps bunch, we also do tech talks. And it's interesting that we're talking about zero trust because we're also talking with Mutter about the Mutter mobile attack, which is attacking. And that's why people are building zero trust. So the Mutter mobile attack session with the spec lead from Mutter was just a few weeks ago. There's a link here to that replay. If you want to learn more about the kinds of attacks that zero trust is trying to protect you against, strongly recommend you go to that session. It was a really great walkthrough of how Mutter mobile attack is evolving and resources you can use to protect your enterprise. And so with that, we're going to take a question or two here. So I'm going to open the question box and look at things coming in here. So okay, so this one's your direction, John. So if someone wants to get started with IBM going down zero trust, what would they do? Where should they go?
So we have a website dedicated to zero trust, and inside of that website, we've got a number of offerings that can help organizations kind of get to the bottom of it. I know that we've talked a lot about mobile, but we have a tremendous amount of tools that can help you in the cloud and outside of mobile too. So, I think it'd be bad of me not to mention maybe IBM Security QRadar Suite and some of the other tools that are available that are pretty amazing. I also would suggest that we have workshops that are available. So I think maybe we can get some links that we add in here for people to go check us out online.
Got it. And I've got a related question, how to get started with NowSecure. I think two thoughts for you is definitely take a look at NowSecure Academy. If you're here, you're trying to learn, John talked about it earlier, go ahead and get started, whether you're a developer and want to learn the 5 basic secure coding skills, or maybe a pen tester or a security analyst who might be new to mobile and you want to learn the mobile side, that's all there for you at academy.nowsecure.com. And if you've already got a mobile app, give us a ping. We have a free test your app. We'll go take a look at it. We'll analyze it. You can consult with one of our people and freely understand what's wrong with it. And while you do that, you can ask some zero trust questions as well. And so with that, we're at the end of our time. I want to thank John for joining us today. Would you like to say any closing remarks?
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you, Brian. And I look forward to our next webinar.
Well, there we go. So again, thank you for joining us in this month's DevSecOps Bunch, talking with John Mutter here from IBM and the great IBM Experience team. They have literally built thousands of apps that you probably use, many of them every day. And so they do a great job. And what IBM has done as a whole company is really helping raise the bar on zero trust across the enterprise. As John said, we focus a lot on mobile today, but zero trust is an enterprise-wide really infrastructure play and strategy change. So we encourage you to take advantage of that. So I'll remind you a couple places you can see us. I said earlier, sign up for the Tech Talks. Looking forward to seeing folks at Black Hat and DEF CON if you're going to be around. We've got a Freedom Meetup. We've got some other interesting things going on. We've got an upcoming benchmark report with Coalfire and more. And you'll get a link to register for the next session next month. So we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again for joining this month's DevSecOps Bunch, and we wish you a great day. Thanks, everyone.